I think I've just set myself up for the hardest day of my life. I did it. I sent the text, the breakup text. While he's asleep too. Right now, he's probably just lying there, peacefully unaware that everything's about to change. The moment he wakes up tomorrow and reads it, my whole world is going to flip upside down. Maybe that sounds dramatic, but that's how it feels. It wasn't a long text. Just a few sentences telling him it's over, that I can't do this anymore. But here I am, sitting in my bed at 3 a.m., staring at the phone like it's a ticking time bomb. And I'm blocked on everything, Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, you name it, except our main messaging app where I left the breakup text. I didn't even leave him much of a window to respond. I guess part of me doesn't want to deal with whatever comes next. I don't know what's worse, the guilt or the fear. The guilt of breaking things off, even though I know deep down it's what I had to do. Or the fear of what he'll say or do when he finds out. I'm dreading his response, honestly. His anger, his manipulation, maybe even his apologies. I don't know. But I feel terrible. What makes it so much harder is that for a long time he was my everything. He was the first person to accept me for all that I am, every weird quirk and insecurity. And I don't just mean that in the romantic sense, he was like my best friend too. It's not often that you find someone you can be 100% vulnerable with, and now that I'm realizing it's over, it feels like I've ripped out part of myself. It hurts in ways I didn't expect, even though I'm not going to miss him in the way you might think. I won't miss the way he made me feel trapped, that's for sure. But I'll miss the person I thought he was when we first met, the way we laughed together, the connection that I believed was real. I still can't believe I got to this point. If you told me a year ago that I'd be sitting here, feeling scared and broken after ending things with him, I wouldn't have believed you. A year ago, I would have sworn we were solid. I thought I had found the one, you know? The person I was going to spend the rest of my life with. I guess it's true what they say, love can blind you to a lot of things. Looking back, it all seems so obvious, but when you're in it, you can't see it. Or you choose not to see it. When we first got together, everything felt perfect. He was so sweet and attentive, always making me feel like I was the center of his universe. I hadn't experienced that kind of attention before. He would text me good morning, good night, and every hour in between. At first, it felt like he just couldn't get enough of me. And, honestly, that was flattering. I liked being needed like that. Who wouldn't? But as time went on, that constant attention started to feel a little more suffocating. If I didn't respond fast enough, he'd get moody. Sometimes he'd start with little jabs like, "What, you're too busy to talk to me now." Or, "I guess you're with someone else, huh?" At first, I brushed it off as him just being insecure, thinking it was cute in a way that he cared so much. But those comments didn't stop. If anything, they got worse. I'd be at work or out with friends and my phone would blow up. He'd text me over and over, asking where I was, who I was with, why I wasn't answering. It was like he needed to know every little detail of what I was doing at all times. And if I tried to push back, if I told him I needed space, he'd flip the switch. Suddenly, he'd be apologizing, telling me he's sorry for being so insecure, that he just loves me so much and doesn't want to lose me. And I'd fall for it. Every time. I'd tell myself that he was just scared of losing me because he cared so much, but there was always this little voice in the back of my head telling me something wasn't right. I just didn't want to listen to it. And it wasn't just the texting. He started to get weirdly possessive about my appearance, too. Like, if we were going out, he'd make these little comments about what I was wearing. At first, it was subtle, like, "Oh, I think you look better in the other dress," or "Don't you think that top is a little too revealing?" But then it got more direct. He'd flat out tell me not to wear certain things because it would attract attention from other guys. It made me feel so self-conscious, like I was always doing something wrong. He'd say it was because he didn't want other guys checking me out, but it just felt controlling. I didn't feel like I could be myself around him anymore. It wasn't just about clothes, either. He had a problem with any guy I talked to, even if it was just an old friend from school. He'd get so jealous, accusing me of flirting or being interested in someone else. I stopped talking to a lot of people just to avoid the drama. I didn't even realize how much I had isolated myself because of him until it was too late. I didn't have anyone anymore. No friends to lean on, no one to talk to when things got bad. He was all I had left. And that's what scares me the most now. Now that I've ended it, I feel so alone. I don't have anyone. My whole life became him, and now he's gone, and I don't know how to fill that void. It's like I've been walking around in a fog, and suddenly it's lifted, but all I see is this empty space where my life used to be. I guess that's part of why it took me so long to break up with him. I knew that if I left, I'd be alone, and that terrified me. I tried to convince myself that the bad parts weren't that bad, that I could handle it if it meant not being alone. But eventually it just became too much. The constant accusations, the jealousy, the way he made me feel like I was never good enough, it all wore me down. I felt like I was losing myself, like I was becoming a shell of the person I used to be. The final straw was when he started getting angry. Not just moody or upset, but angry. He never hit me or anything like that, but there was this simmering rage just beneath the surface. I could feel it, and it scared me. He'd throw things, punch walls, scream at me for the smallest things. I'd be walking on eggshells, trying not to set him off, but it didn't matter. Something always did. One night, he got so mad that I thought he might actually hit me. He didn't, but the look in his eyes. I'll never forget that. It was like he wasn't even seeing me anymore. I felt like an object to him, something he owned, not someone he loved. That's when I knew I had to get out. It wasn't safe for me to stay anymore. I tried to break up with him in person a few times, but I could never go through with it. He'd always find a way to manipulate me into staying. He'd cry, tell me how much he loved me, how he was sorry for everything, how he'd change. And I wanted to believe him. I really did. But nothing ever changed. It only got worse. So tonight, I did the only thing I could think of. I sent him a text while he was sleeping so I wouldn't have to deal with his reaction in person. I told him that I couldn't do this anymore, that I needed to focus on myself and my own mental health. I told him that I still cared about him, but that our relationship was toxic and I needed to end it for both of our sakes. And then I blocked him on everything. Well, almost everything. I left him unblocked on our main texting app so he could see the breakup message. Part of me is terrified to see what he's going to say when he wakes up. I don't know if he's going to try to guilt me into coming back, or if he's going to lash out in anger. Maybe both. I honestly have no idea. I don't think I'll sleep tonight. Every time my phone buzzes, I jump. I know it's not him, he's still asleep, but I can't help it. I'm dreading the morning when he wakes up and reads the message. I'm dreading the flood of texts or calls or whatever else he's going to do to try to reach me. But I'm also dreading the silence. What if he doesn't say anything? What if he just disappears from my life without a fight? I don't know which would be worse. Everyone keeps telling me that it's possible he could get physically violent. I don't want to believe that, but after everything that's happened, I can't say for sure that he wouldn't. That's why I've been so careful about blocking him and making sure he can't show up at my place. But the fear is still there, nagging at the back of my mind. I hate that I'm the one sitting here feeling guilty. I hate that I'm the one who feels like the bad guy for leaving when he's the one who's hurt me so much. It's like I've been brainwashed into thinking that I deserve this, that somehow this is my fault. And even though I know, logically, that I made the right decision, it doesn't stop me from feeling like crap about it. I don't know how I'm going to get through tomorrow. I feel like I'm going to crumble under the weight of everything. I've never felt so broken, so lost. Part of me wonders if I made the wrong choice, but I know that's just fear talking. I know that staying with him would have only hurt me more in the long run. But still, I wish things could have been different. I wish he hadn't been so controlling, so manipulative. I wish he could have loved me in a healthy way because I know there was love there at some point. It just got twisted along the way. And now, I'm left trying to pick up the pieces of my life, wondering where it all went wrong. If anyone's been through something like this, please tell me it gets easier. I don't know how to stop feeling so horrible. How do you cope with losing the person who was your entire world, even if they weren't good for you? How do you move on from something like this?
Looking back on it now, I can't believe how far I've come. I'm in a really happy relationship right now, almost 2.5 years in, and it's everything I could have dreamed of. But the thing is, every once in a while, my mind drifts back to my ex, and what I went through with him, and how it all shaped me. Honestly, I wish I didn't even think about him anymore, but I guess trauma sticks with you longer than love ever could. Before I met my current partner, I was dating my ex for a while, and let me tell you, it was not a healthy relationship. I'm not proud of a lot of the ways I acted while I was with him, but now that I've been in therapy for a while, I've started to understand that a lot of it was due to something called reactive abuse. I'd never heard of that term before, but essentially, it means that when you're in an abusive relationship, sometimes you end up acting out in ways you wouldn't normally. Like, you're pushed to your limits by the abuse, and it triggers these emotional outbursts or behaviors that are totally out of character for you. It was a hard pill to swallow, realizing that I'd been put in that position, but it also helped me see the whole picture more clearly. My ex. Yeah, he was emotionally abusive for sure. It didn't start that way though. It never does, right? When we first started dating, he seemed sweet, attentive, and caring. It was a whirlwind romance in the beginning. I mean, don't we all want to believe that the person we're with is the one? That was me. I thought he was going to be my forever, despite the red flags that I started noticing pretty early on. But I ignored them because, well, that's what you do when you think you're in love. You justify things, make excuses for their behavior, tell yourself, maybe I'm just being too sensitive, or I'm overreacting. Except I wasn't. The emotional abuse crept in slowly, like this shadow that just kept getting bigger and darker over time. He'd say things to undermine my confidence, making me doubt myself in all sorts of little ways. I'd pick out an outfit I felt good in, and he'd casually comment, "You're really going to wear that?" Or if I made plans with friends, he'd make me feel guilty, saying things like, "Oh, I guess I'm not enough for you." It was like he wanted me to feel like I couldn't function without his approval, like I needed him for everything. And for a while, I believed it. I became so wrapped up in trying to make him happy that I lost sight of what I needed to feel okay. But it wasn't just emotional abuse. No, that would have been too simple. He also manipulated me sexually, which is something I still struggle to talk about. It wasn't that he physically forced me into things, but he had this way of making me feel like I didn't have a choice. He'd guilt-trip me into sex, saying that if I really loved him, I'd do what he wanted, even when I wasn't comfortable. Sometimes I felt like I was just a tool for him, a body he could use to make himself feel good. He never asked how I felt, if I was okay, or if I wanted to. It was always about him. Then there were the occasional physical outbursts. He never hit me, but he'd push me, shove me into walls, grab me hard enough to leave bruises. I tried to tell myself it wasn't that bad because, well, he wasn't punching me, right? It wasn't like those horror stories you hear about women in abusive relationships. But now I know that physical abuse doesn't always look like that. Sometimes it's the little things, the shoves and grabs that make you feel scared, that keep you walking on eggshells because you don't know when the next outburst will come. In the middle of all this, I had a really good relationship with his mom. She's honestly such a wonderful, sweet woman, and I felt like she was one of the only bright spots during that time in my life. We'd hang out, just the two of us sometimes, and talk about life. She'd tell me stories about her past, about how hard things were for her when she was younger, especially because of their family dynamic. Her and my ex's dad, oh my God, what a piece of work. They got divorced because he cheated on her with multiple women while she was undergoing cancer treatment. Can you imagine? Here's this strong, beautiful woman, fighting for her life, and this guy, her husband, is out sleeping around. It makes my blood boil just thinking about it. But she never let it make her bitter. She was always so positive, even when talking about the darkest parts of her life. She's honestly an inspiration in so many ways. She also had 2 daughters, my ex's sisters, who were both diagnosed with schizophrenia. The younger one, she's really lovely, just the sweetest girl. She takes her medication, is really self-aware, and is just an all-around good person. I liked her a lot. But the older sister? Yikes. She was a whole different story. She refused to acknowledge that she even had a disorder and would act out in these really intense, sometimes dangerous ways. I tried to get along with her, but she made it pretty clear from the start that she didn't like me. I'll never forget one incident in particular. It was at their mom's house, and we were all staying over for a long weekend. My ex's mom had set up a guest room for me, and it was nice, a cozy little space with a soft bed and a window that let in the perfect amount of morning sunlight. It should have been a relaxing getaway. But the older sister had other plans. I'm not sure what I did to set her off that time, but she decided to pour strong cleaning chemicals, bleach of all things, over the bed I was supposed to sleep in. I didn't know until I laid down that night, and by the time I realized, it was too late. The chemical burns were no joke. I had red, blistering patches of skin all over my back, arms, and legs. I was in so much pain, but what made it worse was that I felt trapped. I didn't want to cause drama with my ex's family, so I didn't even tell anyone right away. I was scared of what his sister might do if she found out I was upset. I didn't want to be the one to rock the boat, especially since I was already dealing with so much at home with my ex. Looking back, I can't believe I let it slide. But when you're in a toxic environment, you start to normalize things that are completely unacceptable. I was so deep into that mess that I didn't even realize how bad things had gotten. Things kept escalating between my ex and me. His moods were all over the place, and I never knew what version of him I was going to get. Some days, he'd be charming and loving, the guy I'd fallen for in the beginning. Other days, he'd be cold, distant, and cruel. The emotional roller coaster was exhausting, but I stayed. I stayed because I was scared of being alone, and I convinced myself that I could change him. If I just loved him enough, if I just tried hard enough, maybe things would get better. But they didn't. They never did. It all came to a head when I realized I couldn't keep living like that. I was miserable, and I'd lost touch with who I was. I felt like I was disappearing into this toxic relationship, and I knew that if I didn't leave, I'd completely lose myself. But leaving wasn't easy. We were living together at the time, and he wasn't paying rent or contributing in any meaningful way. I paid for groceries, his steroids, yeah, turns out he was using those too, and even helped him pay off his debt. He basically lived off me, and I was too emotionally drained to put a stop to it. But with the support of my friends, I finally found the strength to kick him out. It wasn't pretty. There were tears, yelling, the whole 9 yards. But when he walked out that door, I felt this overwhelming sense of relief, like I could finally breathe again. I remember standing there in my now empty apartment, just feeling this massive weight lift off my shoulders. It wasn't long after we broke up that I tried to hang out with his mom again. I still loved her and didn't want to lose that connection. She had been so good to me, and I wanted to stay in her life in some capacity, even if things between me and her son were done. But, of course, he found out. I don't know how. I guess he was keeping tabs on me, or maybe his mom mentioned it in passing. Either way, he was pissed. He called his mom and started screaming at her over the phone, saying she didn't have his permission to hang out with me. Like what? First of all, she's his mother. She doesn't need permission from anyone to see who she wants to see. Second of all, who does he think he is? The level of entitlement was off the charts. But his mom, God, I love that woman. She just brushed it off like it was nothing. She told him straight up, I'm your mother. You don't get to tell me what to do. It was one of those moments where I felt validated in my decision to leave him. His own mother didn't take his crap, so why had I? Why had I put up with his controlling, abusive behavior for so long? It made me realize how deeply I'd been manipulated, how much of myself I'd lost in the process of trying to make him happy. After I finally broke things off with my ex and cut ties with that toxic chapter of my life, I thought I was done. I mean, once you leave an emotionally and physically abusive relationship, the last thing you want is any lingering connection to that person, right? But life's not always that simple, especially when family's involved. My ex, for all his faults, and trust me, there were many, has a mom who is genuinely one of the sweetest, most loving women I've ever met. You know how sometimes you meet someone who just radiates warmth and kindness? That's her. I think a part of me held on to that relationship with her because she was one of the few good things I got out of my time with him. It's not like I talk to her all the time, but we're still friends on Facebook. We'll comment on each other's posts here and there or chat once in a blue moon. Nothing major, but enough to keep the connection alive. Which brings me to now. My ex and I have been broken up for years at this point, but just a few days ago, his mom invited me out for a birthday lunch. It kind of came out of nowhere. She sent me a message saying she'd love for me to join her and their youngest daughter for a nice, low-key lunch this Sunday. It was a sweet invite. And when I saw it, my first reaction was to say yes. I genuinely like her, and her youngest daughter is also an absolute sweetheart, like, the nicest person. She was always really kind to me when I was with my ex, and we got along well. So, in theory, it sounds like it should be no big deal, right? But here's the problem. I'm not sure how I feel about it. I mean, really feel about it. Part of me feels like it would be weird to go. It's not like I'm in contact with my ex at all, but he's still her son. And it's hard to shake the fear of what might happen if he found out we were hanging out again. My ex has always had this idea that he's an alpha male. Like, seriously, he would go on about it all the time. He thought because he was a man and a bodybuilder, he had some special status in the world. I can't even tell you how many times he'd look in the mirror, flexing or whatever, and say stuff like, "I'm part of the top 1% of the most attractive people in the world." Cringe, right? But back then, I was so deep into his manipulations that I'd just smile and nod along, even though I knew it was all BS. His idea of being the man of the house was equally ridiculous. It wasn't just about the physical space we lived in, but he genuinely thought he had some kind of inherent authority over me because of his gender. I guess it was part of that whole alpha male mindset. And, let's be real, that toxic thinking is part of what fed into his abusive behavior. He thought he could control everything, including me. So naturally, I'm nervous about him finding out I'm still in touch with his mom. Even though it's been years, there's this fear that he could somehow stir things up again or make life difficult for me. But that's not the only thing on my mind. My partner, the guy I've been with for over 2.5 years now, is wonderful. He's been there for me in ways I didn't even know I needed, and our relationship is honestly the healthiest, happiest thing I've ever experienced. After coming out of the mess that was my relationship with my ex, I can't even begin to describe how grateful I am for what I have now. And part of me wonders if going to this lunch would somehow feel like a betrayal to my partner, even though I know it's not about my ex, it's about his mom. I guess I'm just scared of how he'll react to the idea of me spending time with someone so closely tied to my ex. I haven't even told him about the invite yet. I don't know why. It's not like he'd get angry or anything. He's not that kind of person. But I also know that we're super open with each other about everything, and part of me feels like it would be wrong to go without having a conversation with him first. So I've been sitting here, wondering how to bring it up, or if I should even go at all. When I first got her message, I kind of panicked. I told her that my parents were coming to town and that I'd keep her posted as a way to buy myself some time. I thought maybe I could figure out how to handle it in the meantime. But then, she responded by saying we could reschedule for the following Sunday if that worked better for me. She mentioned that her youngest daughter, the one who's always been really kind to me, would be there too. And now I'm stuck. It's not like I can keep dodging her forever. She's being so nice, and I don't want to hurt her feelings, but I also don't know if I should go at all. There's just this nagging feeling in the back of my mind that it's wrong somehow. Like, is it appropriate for me to still be hanging out with my ex's mom after all this time? Especially when I know how horrible he was to me. It feels like a weird balancing act between wanting to maintain a friendship with someone I genuinely care about, but also wanting to respect the boundaries of my current relationship and protect myself from any potential fallout with my ex. And honestly, the fear of my ex is still real. Even though it's been years, I can't shake that anxious feeling that he could pop up and cause drama. It's like, in my head, I know I'm free from him and his toxicity, but there's a part of me that's still scared of what he might do if he found out. After all, he once told his mom she didn't have permission to hang out with me, and he completely lost it when she ignored him. That whole situation is still burned into my memory. I don't know if he's changed or if he's still that same controlling, possessive person, but I'm not really interested in finding out the hard way. So now, I'm sitting here trying to figure out what to do. I know I need to talk to my partner about it, but even if he says it's okay, I'm still not sure if it's the right thing to do. I don't want to make him feel uncomfortable or disrespected, and I don't want to put myself in a situation that could potentially bring my ex back into my life, even tangentially. I could just tell her no, but then I'm stuck trying to figure out how to phrase it. I don't want to hurt her feelings or make it seem like I don't appreciate the invitation. It's tricky because I do like her, and I'd like to think that our friendship could exist independently of my history with her son. But is that even possible? Or am I just kidding myself? At the end of the day, she's still his mom, and that connection is always going to be there, whether I like it or not. I think I'm also worried that if I go, it might stir up old emotions. Not feelings for my ex, God no, but memories. I've done so much work in therapy to process everything that happened during that relationship, but sometimes, Being around people who are connected to him brings up old wounds. It's like a part of me is scared that I'll be sucked back into that chapter of my life, even though I know that's not really how it works. Still, trauma has a funny way of lingering, even when you think you're past it. I feel so conflicted. On one hand, I want to see her and spend time with someone who has always been so kind to me. On the other hand, I feel like there's too much baggage attached to it. Is it really worth putting myself in a situation that could open old wounds or cause unnecessary drama? So, I guess I'm just looking for some advice. Has anyone else been in a similar situation, where you stayed friends with an ex's family member even after the breakup? How did you handle it? And how do I talk to my partner about this without making it into a bigger deal than it needs to be? I don't want to make any decisions without his input, but I also don't want to cause problems where there aren't any. And if I do decide not to go, how do I let her down gently? I don't want to hurt her feelings, but I also don't want to put myself in a situation that feels wrong. So that's where I'm at right now. I just feel stuck between wanting to keep that bit of kindness from my past and needing to respect the present, and more importantly, my future. If anyone has any thoughts, I'd love to hear them because, honestly, I'm going around in circles trying to figure out what to do.
I don't even know where to start. I guess I just need to get this off my chest and maybe get some advice because I feel like I'm going in circles. So my boyfriend and I have been together for a while, and things are usually good between us. But whenever I bring up issues, like even the smallest things, it always turns into this huge emotional ordeal. And I'm not talking about regular disagreements or arguments. I mean, he completely deflects and breaks down every single time, to the point where I feel like I can't even talk to him about anything without everything turning into his problems, his trauma, or his pain. And it's exhausting. The other day, something happened that really left me confused and honestly kind of upset. I brought up a small issue, something really minor. It wasn't even a fight or anything, just one of those things you talk about in a relationship to get on the same page. I can't even remember exactly what it was now, because his reaction completely overshadowed the actual conversation. Anyway, we were just sitting there, and I brought it up calmly and respectfully, thinking we'd talk about it like adults. But that's not what happened at all. Instead, he got really defensive right away, like instantly. And then, out of nowhere, he started getting emotional. Not just a little bit, like teary-eyed or whatever, but full-on crying. He went from 0 to 100 so fast that it caught me off guard. I was still trying to get through the issue I brought up, and suddenly he's sitting there, sobbing, telling me he wishes he had his kids and wishes he wasn't alive. He kept repeating it over and over, like a broken record. I wish I had my kids. I wish I wasn't alive. It was honestly terrifying to hear. I didn't know what to do. I mean, what does one thing have to do with the other? We weren't even talking about his kids or his past. The issue I brought up had nothing to do with his children or his family. I was trying to talk about us, something between the two of us. And he just spiraled into this emotional breakdown about his kids and his life and how everything is terrible. It made me feel like the conversation had completely slipped out of my control, like it wasn't even about what I needed to talk about anymore. Here's some background. He doesn't have the best relationship with his kids since he separated from their mother, and I get that it's a huge source of pain for him. It's not like I'm insensitive to that. I've always tried to be supportive, listen when he needs to vent, and be there for him emotionally. But what I don't understand is how every time I bring up a problem in our relationship, it turns into his trauma from his past, or his pain from losing touch with his kids, or his issues with his ex. It's like there's no room for me or for my feelings in these conversations. I'm always pushed into the role of comforting him, even when I'm the one trying to address something that's bothering me. So there we were, sitting on the couch, and he's just crying uncontrollably, talking about how he feels like everyone hates him and how he wishes things were different with his kids. And suddenly, I find myself in that same position I always end up in, consoling him. I mean, what else am I supposed to do? He's sitting there, crying and talking about not wanting to be alive, and I'm just left with no choice but to drop the issue I originally brought up so I can comfort him. And that's exactly what he wanted. I could feel it. It's like this pattern that's been happening over and over again. Anytime I try to talk to him about something important, or bring up something that's bothering me, it turns into his emotional meltdown. And then it's suddenly not about me or my concerns anymore. It's about him, his pain, his sadness. And I get stuck in this role of trying to baby him through it. If I don't, he just gets angrier, cries more, and escalates the whole thing until I have no choice but to save the conversation for another time. Which, let's be real, never actually happens. It feels manipulative to me. Like, is this a form of narcissism? Or maybe manipulation? I don't even know what to call it, but it's frustrating as hell. I feel like every time I try to address something real, he shuts me down by turning the focus onto himself. It's always about how bad he feels, how much he's hurting, how much he's struggling. And I'm left sitting there, pushing my own feelings aside because somehow I'm expected to manage his emotions before we can even talk about mine. It's exhausting. I know he has family trauma, and I know his relationship with his kids and their mom has left him feeling broken. I get that. But what I don't understand is why he uses that pain to deflect from every conversation that's important to us. I mean, isn't that kind of stuff what therapy is for? He's not in therapy, by the way. I've suggested it more times than I can count, but he always brushes it off or says he doesn't need it. I honestly think he does, though, because every time we have a tough conversation, it feels like I'm talking to someone who's drowning in their own past, and there's no room for me to stand next to him. What's really starting to get to me is how predictable it's becoming. Like the second I bring up anything, and I mean anything, that isn't sunshine and rainbows, I can already see the storm coming. He'll get this look on his face, like he's ready to shut down. And before I know it, we're back to him crying about his kids or his ex or how unfair life is. And don't get me wrong, I feel for him, I really do. But it's like there's no space for us to have a normal, healthy conversation because it always derails into this emotional spiral. And the worst part, I'm starting to feel guilty for even wanting to talk about issues in our relationship. It's like I've been trained, through all these emotional breakdowns, to just not bring things up. Because every time I do, it turns into this mess where I end up comforting him instead of addressing the actual problem. I'm left feeling like my concerns don't matter, like they're not valid, because his pain and his trauma always seem to take priority. And that's not how it should be, right? I don't know what to do. I feel stuck between trying to be a good partner, someone who's understanding and supportive, and wanting to scream because my needs aren't being met. It's like we can't have a normal conversation without his past completely consuming it. Why does a simple question turn into him crying over his kids? Why does he say everyone hates him? And then suddenly I'm supposed to drop everything and console him. It's like this cycle that never ends. The more I think about it, the more I realize that I'm always the one who has to put my feelings aside. I'm always the one who has to be the strong one, the caretaker, the emotional support. And I'm not saying I don't want to be supportive. I do. But when it's every single time we have an important conversation, it starts to feel like manipulation. I'm forced to save the conversation for later, to baby him, because if I don't, he just spirals more, gets angrier, cries harder, and it turns into this emotional disaster that I can't handle. I guess the thing I'm really struggling with is figuring out what's normal. Is this normal? Is it normal for a partner to break down every time you try to address something? Is it normal for conversations to get completely hijacked by their emotional baggage? Because right now, I don't know. I don't have a lot of experience with relationships, and part of me wonders if I'm overreacting. But then again, I know that feeling like I'm walking on eggshells in my own relationship can't be a good sign. I've tried to bring this up with him before, about how I feel like he's deflecting or how his reactions are disproportionate to the issues we're talking about, but you can guess how that went. It turned into another emotional breakdown, and round we go. I don't want to paint him as a bad person, because he's not. I know he's been through a lot, and he's carrying so much pain from his past. He's a good guy in so many ways, but this emotional deflection is starting to feel manipulative, even if it's unintentional. I don't know if he realizes he's doing it or if it's just his way of coping, but either way, it's not healthy for us. I've been reading about narcissism and emotional manipulation, and while I don't think he's a full-blown narcissist, there are definitely some red flags. The way he centers everything around himself, how he always becomes the victim in any discussion, and how I'm expected to console him even when I'm the one who's hurt. It all feels like a tactic to avoid accountability. And I don't know how to handle it without making things worse. So, I guess I'm here because I need advice. I need to know if anyone else has dealt with something like this, and how they managed to get through it. Should I bring it up again and risk another emotional breakdown? Should I just leave it alone and keep walking on eggshells to avoid the drama? I don't know what the right answer is, but I'm so tired of feeling like my needs are second to his trauma.
I've been sitting on this for a while and honestly I feel like I'm going in circles trying to make sense of it. I'm trying to understand my feelings, his accusations, and whether I'm really in the wrong here. So here's the thing. My boyfriend keeps berating me for dealing with another man during a rough patch in our relationship. He calls it cheating, but I don't see it that way, and I can't help but feel like this situation is way more complicated than he's making it out to be. So, some context, he's still technically married. Yeah, I know that should have been my first red flag, but here I am. He's got 3 kids with his wife and they've been separated for years now. Like over 2 years. But here's the kicker. They haven't gotten legally divorced yet because of financial issues, so they're stuck in this weird limbo. To make matters worse, his wife still lives in their marital home, which isn't even their house. It's his mom's house. She has no plans to move out, and I've been waiting, probably too patiently, for him to get his divorce sorted out. I know what you're probably thinking. Why did you even get involved with a married guy? Trust me, I've asked myself that question a million times. But at the time he made it sound like it was all under control. He moved out when they separated, he only sees her when he visits the kids, which is like 3 or 4 times a year. And according to him, their relationship has been dead for years. Even his wife knows he's moved on, and apparently she doesn't consider it adultery. They're just dragging their feet with the legal stuff because divorces are expensive, and he's still trying to figure out how to afford it. Anyway, fast forward to the mess that I'm dealing with now. There were periods in our relationship when he'd pull away from me. Emotionally, physically, everything, and it was all because he was trying to get closer to his kids. He admitted that to me. He'd say things like, "I need to focus on my family right now," or, "I don't want to bring any outside drama into my kids' lives." And I get that, I really do. I'm not heartless. I understand that his kids should be his priority and I wanted to be supportive of that. But the way he went about it felt so cold. It was like whenever things were good with his kids, he didn't need me anymore. He would just shut me out. He'd use me for emotional support when things were rocky between him and his wife, or when he was feeling distant from his kids. But the second they started letting him back in, it was like I didn't exist. He'd pull back, become distant, and basically treat me like an afterthought. And this didn't just happen once. It became a pattern. I was constantly in this cycle of being there for him when he was down, only for him to push me away the moment things were good on the family front. At one point it got so bad that I honestly started to wonder if he even wanted me in his life at all. He made it clear that his family was the only thing he wanted to focus on, and it hurt. It made me feel disposable, like I was just some emotional crutch he leaned on when things weren't going well at home. So yeah, I started pulling back too. And I'm not going to lie, I dealt with someone else during that time. It wasn't like I went out looking for someone to hurt him. It wasn't even that deep. But there was a guy who was showing me attention, making me feel seen and appreciated, 2 things I wasn't getting from my boyfriend at all. I felt so invisible in my own relationship that I let myself get caught up in the attention this other guy was giving me. It felt good to have someone care about me when my own boyfriend was emotionally unavailable, pushing me away and basically making me feel like I wasn't a priority. Now here's where the guilt creeps in. I know I could have just left the relationship when I felt like things were going south. I realize now that would have been the mature thing to do. But at the time I didn't leave. I stayed because I was holding out hope that things would get better, that he'd snap out of whatever he was going through and realize that I was still here, still waiting for him to make me a priority. But instead I stayed and decided to deal with someone else to cope with how I was feeling. Now my boyfriend is calling that cheating. And I get why he's hurt, I do. I'm not excusing my actions. But at the same time, it's hard for me to see it as cheating when he was the one who pushed me away in the first place. He basically told me he didn't want to be with me at that moment, that his family was the only thing that mattered to him, and that I was a distraction he couldn't afford to focus on. So what was I supposed to do? Just sit there waiting indefinitely for him to decide he wanted me again? It didn't feel fair. He keeps saying that I should have just left if I felt like he was hurting me. And yeah, he's right. I should have left. But in the moment, I was so wrapped up in wanting to be there for him, wanting to hold on to whatever scraps of attention he'd give me, that I didn't have the strength to walk away. So I stayed, but I treated him the way I felt like he was treating me. If he could discard me and act like I didn't matter, then why should I treat him any differently? That's what was going through my mind at the time. I know now that it wasn't the healthiest way to cope with the situation, but at the time, it felt like the only way to protect myself. It was like I was saying, fine, if you're going to treat me like I don't matter, then I'm going to find someone who makes me feel like I do. It wasn't even about revenge or trying to hurt him. It was more about filling the void he had left in our relationship. But now he's throwing it in my face every chance he gets. He's calling me a cheater, saying that I broke his trust, and that he can't believe I would do something like that. And the thing is, I don't even recognize the guy I was with anymore. This whole situation has made me see things more clearly, and I've realized that this relationship was toxic from the start. I should have never gotten involved with someone who wasn't even fully divorced yet. I should have never let myself be that other woman, even though his wife supposedly didn't care. It was a bad situation from the beginning and I should have known better. But I'm still sitting here wondering, was it really cheating? I know it wasn't right, but I don't see it the same way he does. He made it clear that I wasn't his priority, that his family was the only thing he cared about, and that I was just there when he needed me for emotional support. So how is it fair for him to call me a cheater when he was the one who essentially pushed me out of the relationship in the first place? He didn't want me when things were good with his kids, so why does he suddenly care so much now? I know I'm not blameless in this. I could have made better choices, and I shouldn't have dealt with another man while I was still technically in a relationship. I realize that now, and it's not something I would ever do again. But I also feel like there's a lot of blame to go around here. He can't just act like he was the perfect partner and I was the one who messed everything up. He treated me like I didn't matter, like I was just a convenience, and I responded in a way that I regret. But I don't see it as cheating the way he does. If I'm being honest, this whole experience has taught me a lot about what I don't want in a relationship. I'll never again get involved with a man who isn't fully available emotionally or otherwise. I'll never again allow myself to be put on the back burner while someone else figures out their life. And I'll definitely never again let myself fall into the trap of tit-for-tat behavior, where I hurt someone just because they hurt me. But even with all these lessons learned, I'm still left with this nagging feeling of guilt, mixed with confusion. Am I really the bad guy here? Or is this just another way for him to deflect from the fact that he wasn't a good partner to begin with? He says that he loves me, but his actions have never made me feel like a priority. He only wanted me around when he was struggling with his family, and once things were better with them, I was left feeling abandoned and hurt. So how is it fair for him to call me a cheater when he discarded me first? I don't know if we're going to be able to move past this, to be honest. It feels like we're both stuck in this cycle of blame and hurt, and I'm not sure if there's any way to fix it. Part of me feels like I'm still holding on to this relationship because of all the time I've invested in it, but another part of me knows that it's probably time to walk away for good. I just can't help but feel like I'm being gaslit into thinking I'm the only one at fault here. I guess what I'm really asking is, how do you even define cheating in a situation like this? Does it still count if the person you're with made it clear that they didn't want you in their life during that time? Or am I just making excuses for bad behavior? I know I've made mistakes and I know I'm not perfect. But I'm just trying to make sense of it all and figure out what's fair in this situation. If anyone has been through something similar or has any advice, I'd really appreciate it because I'm feeling so lost right now.
So let me just get right into it, because I am beyond pissed right now. Like, shaking angry. You know how you get when you've been stewing on something for days, and it just finally hits you, like, wow, I've been played this hard? Yeah, that's where I'm at. Let's start with this guy who I met about 4 years ago on a dating app. I mean, it wasn't anything spectacular at first, just your typical match, chatting, then we met up. He seemed decent, even kind of sweet at the time, and the whole getting to know you phase was fun. We went on a couple of dates, and things seemed to be clicking, or so I thought. Fast forward to date 4, and he drops this whole, I think we should be exclusive bomb on me. Now, maybe I'm just naive, but when a guy tells you he doesn't want you seeing anyone else, it's kind of implied that he's going to do the same, right? Like mutual exclusivity, not some one-sided BS. I wasn't seeing anyone else at the time anyway, so I agreed. Honestly, I thought it was a good thing. Like, wow, here's a guy who's actually serious about me. He's not messing around. We had a decent thing going. Or so I thought. Looking back now, I feel like such an idiot for being happy about it. Because the more I replay everything, the more I see the cracks that were already starting to show. But of course, in the moment, I was blinded by thinking he actually cared about me, about us. I thought I was finally getting what I wanted, a relationship with someone who seemed like they liked me for me. And at that time, the sex was good, and we were seeing each other regularly, which, let's be honest, after a string of non-committal losers, felt like a damn upgrade. Then things started to shift, slowly at first, but enough that I should have noticed. He started standing me up, not like flat out ditching me, but being late or canceling last minute with some lame excuse. At first, it was stuff that sounded legit. Work ran late, his friend had an emergency, whatever. I'd roll my eyes, but let it go, because honestly, we all have busy lives, right? I didn't want to be that needy girl who freaks out over every little thing. But it kept happening. And then, well, he started acting different, like weirdly distant when we were together. One minute, he'd be his usual self, all flirty and attentive, and then the next, it was like I didn't even exist. At first, I thought maybe it was just stress or something, but then he'd start making these snide little comments. Stuff that I brushed off in the moment, but later, yeah. Big red flags. And let's talk about the fights. There was this one big blow up we had, honestly. I can't even remember what set it off. It was probably something stupid, but it escalated, like, fast. We were both throwing jabs, hinting that maybe we were considering other options, and it got ugly. After that, we didn't talk for a few days. I thought we were done, like for real, but then we somehow patched things up. That's the thing about him. He always knew exactly how to pull me back in. He had this way of making me feel like I was the crazy one for even thinking something was wrong. He'd gaslight me so hard I'd start doubting my own feelings. Like, oh, maybe I'm overreacting. Maybe this is normal. Spoiler, it was not normal. So after our little makeup, we planned to hang out. I was actually excited, thinking things might go back to the way they were at the start. But no, of course not. He stood me up again, like full on this time. But because I was still deep in denial, I bought his excuse, something about being caught up with his buddies at the bar. Yeah, sure, fine, whatever. Only later, much later, did I find out the truth. And when I say it hit me like a truck, I mean it. He had lied. His whole "I was caught up with friends" excuse was complete crap. He had stood me up to go hook up with some really hot blonde he met at the bar. Just the mental image of him sitting there, waiting for me. But getting bored and picking up some random girl? It makes me sick just thinking about it. And the worst part? He admitted it. Not like some guilty confession, but casually, like he didn't even think it would hurt me that much. He actually called her really hot to my face. Like, how messed up is that? But I didn't even know about all of this right away. A few days later, before I learned the full truth, he was already pressing me to see him again. I don't even know why I agreed at this point. Maybe part of me was still hoping things would go back to normal. Like if I just stuck it out, we find our way back to the early days when everything was good. So I go to meet him, thinking we're going to do something nice, maybe grab food or hang out somewhere. But nope, he doesn't even want to go out. We end up at his place again. And let me tell you, the vibe was off. The entire time we were hanging out, he seemed distant, bored, like he couldn't wait for me to leave. But I stayed trying to push through the awkwardness, even though deep down, I knew something was wrong. The guy I thought I was falling for was just gone. And then, the next morning, this is the kicker, he dumped me. Not face to face, not even over a phone call, but through a text. A freaking text. And not just any text, but one full of rehashed excuses about why things weren't working out. Blaming me for stuff that, looking back, was mostly in his head. Like all these reasons that he'd been holding over me, none of which he ever bothered to bring up until it was convenient for him to drop me. It was so painfully clear that this had all been a long time coming. He'd been pulling away for months, and instead of just being honest with me, he strung me along, all while keeping his options open on the side. And for what? Just to dump me over a text after everything? I honestly don't know how I didn't see it sooner. So, yeah. A week after he dumped me over that pathetic text, the Real bomb dropped. It turns out he didn't just dump me because of those lame excuses about us not working out. Nope. He dumped me for that hot blonde he hooked up with when he stood me up. Like, wow, right? Just wow. Apparently, this girl, who we'll call Molly, was everything he thought I wasn't. He even had the nerve to tell me in a follow-up conversation, which I don't even know why I had with him, honestly. I must have been out of my mind, that Molly was hotter than me. Straight up said she had a smoking body and made sure to mention she was younger, like 25 or something. Mind you, I was 32 at the time. So hearing that? Yeah, real great for the self-esteem. And of course, because the universe has a twisted sense of humor, she was bisexual too, which he loved to brag about. I swear, he had this smug look on his face when he told me, like he just won some kind of prize. And if that wasn't enough, he had to throw in how she had more free time than me, how she could hit up bars with him whenever he wanted. Oh, and let's not forget that she was better in bed and more fun because she didn't want kids the way I did. I remember just sitting there, staring at him, completely floored. Like, how could someone be so casually cruel? He was acting like my life goals, my desire to settle down and have kids, were some kind of disease, like they made me boring or less fun. Meanwhile, he's divorced and has a daughter that he conveniently never seemed to mention when he was out being this carefree party guy. He had her on the weekends, which, by the way, was one of the excuses he used to blow me off all the time. But apparently, that didn't stop him from going out with Molly and pretending to live this bachelor lifestyle. And here's the kicker. He made Molly his official girlfriend after, like, for weeks. For freaking weeks. I couldn't believe it. This guy, who wouldn't call me his girlfriend after 4 months of dating, was calling this random blonde his girlfriend after a month of knowing her. I mean, it was like a slap in the face. Actually, no, it was like getting slapped, punched, and then kicked while I was down. But as if that wasn't bad enough, he took things to a whole new level of messed up after we broke up. You'd think he'd just move on with Molly, live his best life, and leave me alone, right? Nope. Instead, he decided to go on a full-blown smear campaign against me. He posted all kinds of crap about me online. I'm talking the most humiliating, disgusting stuff you can imagine. And to top it off, he posted explicit pictures of me. Pictures I trusted him with. These were intimate moments between us that he turned into weapons. I had no idea what kind of monster I was dealing with until that happened. Back then, revenge porn wasn't illegal in my state. So while I was completely devastated and humiliated, there wasn't much I could do about it legally. He knew that, too. He knew exactly how to push the boundaries without technically getting into trouble. It was sick. The worst part, those pictures and stories ended up in the hands of all the people I least wanted to see them. Coworkers, acquaintances, even distant family members. I had to endure people giving me looks, whispering behind my back. It was like my life imploded overnight, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. Every time I opened my social media, I was terrified of what I'd find. The gossip, the judgment. I can't even put into words how humiliating it was. And it wasn't just the pictures. He wrote all these nasty, made-up stories about me. Things like I was obsessed with him, that I was some kind of psycho ex who couldn't let go, that I was bad in bed, whatever. And because he posted it publicly, people believed him. It's like once something's out there on the internet, it's out of your control. People take it and run with it, and suddenly you're branded as this crazy person. And it sticks. I had to go into hiding, basically. I deleted my social media accounts, made everything private. I even changed my hair color to something less flattering, just so I wouldn't look like the girl in those pictures anymore. I was that desperate to distance myself from what he'd done to me. It's crazy, right? That something like this can literally make you feel like you need to change who you are just to escape the humiliation. It wasn't just my public life that took a hit either. This whole thing screwed me up in ways I didn't even realize at first. My confidence? Gone. My ability to trust people? Completely shattered. I found myself second-guessing everyone's intentions, wondering if the next person I got involved with would do the same thing to me. It's like when someone does something so malicious, it taints everything. You start to wonder if you can ever really trust anyone again. I became paranoid, anxious, constantly looking over my shoulder. Every time my phone buzzed with a notification, my heart would race. Was it more dirt about me spreading online? Were more people seeing those pictures? It was a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. I couldn't even look people in the eye without wondering if they'd seen the post, if they were silently judging me. I withdrew from my friends, kept to myself. I just didn't want to deal with the world anymore. And the thing is, he got away with it. He moved on with his life with Molly, while I was left to pick up the pieces of mine. He got to be the cool guy with the hot new girlfriend, while I became the punchline of his twisted jokes. He ruined my reputation, my sense of self, and for what? Just because he could. Fast forward to now, and honestly, I thought I was done with him. Like after all the crap he put me through, I was finally starting to heal. I went low-key on social media, kept my circle small, and tried to focus on getting my life back together. But of course, he couldn't just let me move on in peace. So get this, recently, this idiot somehow found my social media profile. The one I'd purposely made unsearchable. I don't even know how he did it, but all of a sudden, there he was, popping up in my messages like a bad nightmare that just won't end. He didn't stop there either. Oh no. He took it a step further and started messaging my friends. My closest friends. Like, what the hell? How obsessed do you have to be to track down my people and try to stir up drama again after all these years? At first, I thought I could just ignore it, Like, not give him the satisfaction of reacting. But when he started dragging my friends into it, I knew I had to do something. A friend of a friend, I'm talking one of those super sleuth types, started digging around and actually found out that he had been talking crap online about other people too. Not just me. He was pulling the same shady stuff with his exes, though from what we found, nothing he posted about them was nearly as bad as the stuff he put out about me. Still, it was clear he hadn't changed. He was still out there, smearing people's reputations like it was some kind of hobby. That's when I decided to dig a little deeper. I ended up talking to his old best friend, Danielle, who, by the way, turned out to be one of the nicest people I've ever met. Like, how she stayed friends with him for so long is beyond me. Anyway, Danielle and I connected, and we talked in great detail about all the crap he'd been pulling for years. Turns out she knew a lot about his exes, especially the infamous Molly. Now, here's where things get real interesting. Remember how he used to brag about Molly being this young, hot, carefree blonde who was supposedly way more fun than me? The one who didn't have kids and didn't want them? Yeah. Well, buckle up, because that was all a massive lie. Thanks to Danielle and some extra digging, I found out that Molly isn't even her real name. Her real name is Marina, and she's not 25 like he had me believe. She's actually 36, which, side note, makes her older than me. I couldn't believe it when I heard. Like, this whole time he was throwing her in my face, acting like she was some young, wild, free-spirited chick, and in reality, she was closer to 40, and wait for it, she had a kid. Yeah, you heard that right. A freaking kid. He had the audacity to tell me that one of the reasons he liked Marina better than me was because she didn't want kids and could party with him whenever. Meanwhile, she was a mom to a son who was like 10 or 12 at the time. I was shook. And get this, her kid isn't even white. He's half Indian. Marina's ex-husband is Indian, and I guess their son looks a lot like him. Now, if that doesn't scream irony, I don't know what does. Because this guy who I now know is a closet racist used to make fun of his ex-wife behind her back for dating an Indian man. He'd say all this awful, cringy stuff that made my skin crawl. And now he's out here hooking up with a woman who has a biracial child? The same guy who had no problem mocking other people for their relationships? It's like, what even is his logic? I remember sitting there after Danielle told me all of this, and I couldn't wrap my head around it. His hypocrisy knows no bounds. He goes on and on about how Marina was so much more fun than me because she didn't have kids or care about settling down, when in reality, she was a mother herself. It's like he built this whole fantasy version of her to justify treating me like garbage. And the worst part is I believed him. For so long, I let myself feel inferior to this made-up version of her because of all the lies he fed me. All those times he made me feel boring or less fun for wanting a stable relationship, for wanting to have a family. And meanwhile, he's over here with someone who has the exact same situation I was aiming for. But because it was her, it was okay. I mean, don't get me wrong. Marina sounds like she's probably a great person. From what I've heard, she's stunningly pretty with this wavy blonde hair and an amazing body. Honestly, she sounds like a supermodel or something. I can admit that, no problem. But that's not even the point. The point is, he made it seem like she was this unattainable, perfect fantasy woman, all while lying to me and himself about who she really was. He even used her to mock my own life goals, like wanting kids and stability made me lame or something. It's all so messed up. Danielle also mentioned that he and Marina didn't even last that long. Shocker, right? Apparently, their relationship blew up after a few months because, surprise, he is a toxic mess and probably did to her what he did to me. It's just mind-blowing to think about how much effort he put into making me feel like I wasn't good enough, only to turn around and date someone who basically wanted the same things I did. I still don't get how his mind works. It's like he can't deal with reality, so he creates these twisted versions of people to fit whatever narrative he's pushing at the time. With me, it was all about how I wasn't fun enough, how I was too serious because I wanted a real relationship. But with Marina, he pretended she was this carefree, childless woman who could party with him whenever he wanted. It's like he couldn't handle being with a real person, so he just made things up. It's insane to think that after all this time, after 4 years of him dragging my name through the mud, I'm still dealing with the fallout from this one guy. Like, why can't he just leave me alone? Why is he still trying to insert himself into my life and cause drama? I don't even care about him or what he's doing, but he keeps coming back like some kind of bad penny. Anyway, after talking to Danielle and putting the pieces together, I felt a weird sense of closure. Not because his antics made any more sense, they still don't, but because I finally realized that none of it was my fault. His behavior has nothing to do with me or anything I did. He's just broken. And he'll probably keep doing this to other people until he either burns out or someone finally calls him out in a way that sticks. But I'm not going to let him keep messing with my life. I'm still angry, don't get me wrong. It's hard not to be when someone's done this much damage. But I'm also relieved in a way. Knowing the truth about him and his lies about Molly or Marina, about how much of a fraud he really is, has helped me move on a little bit. It's like, yeah, he hurt me, but now I know it wasn't because I wasn't good enough. It was because he's too messed up to handle a real relationship with anyone. And as for the harassment, I'm taking steps to deal with it. I've blocked him on everything I can think of, and I've made sure my friends know what's going on so they don't fall for whatever lies he's trying to spread. If he keeps pushing, I'm ready to take it to the next level. I'm not going to let him ruin my life any more than he already has. I swear, the more I think about it, the more I'm left questioning everything. Like, why would this guy who claimed wanted a carefree, child-free life suddenly ditch me, who was very clear from day one that I wanted marriage and kids, and jump into a relationship with a woman who already had a child? And not just jump into a relationship, but commit to her, live with her, and make her his girlfriend in a matter of weeks, after stringing me along for months? It drives me nuts because it doesn't make any sense. I mean, it's not like I want him back or anything, believe me. I know now he's toxic and terrible, but I just can't wrap my head around contradiction. He was 36 when we were dating, and I was 32, but somehow I was too old or too settled for him. He'd constantly neg me for wanting kids, for wanting stability, acting like my life goals were some massive burden. But then he goes and shacks up with Marina, who, by the way, was older than me. She was 36 at the time, and he had no problem jumping headfirst into that relationship. And guess what? She has a kid. Like, how does that even make sense? He dumped me for wanting to start a family, but then turned around and committed to someone who already had a family. It's like everything he said to me was just a lie. He always made me feel like I was asking for too much, like my desire for something serious was a huge turnoff. But then he's over here living with Marina after 4 weeks? 4 weeks. I don't know about you, but that sounds pretty damn serious to me. And then Danielle, his old friend, told me that after Marina dumped him and quickly moved on to a new guy, who she's apparently now married to, by the way, he actually followed her to the suburbs. The same suburbs that he constantly nagged when we were dating. He'd always say how he hated it, how it was too far from the city, and he'd never want to live anywhere near there. And yet, after they broke up, he followed her out there like some lost puppy. Meanwhile, when we were together, I lived in the suburbs, and he used it as yet another reason to criticize me, to make me feel like I wasn't good enough because I didn't live the cool city life like he did. Why does he do this? Why does he contradict himself so much? He mocked me for my choices, negged me constantly about wanting kids, yet he chose Marina, a divorced mom with a son, over me. He even lived with her. Like, why was she good enough for that kind of commitment and I wasn't? Why does this happen with guys? It's not that I still want him, because trust me, I know better now. But it's the principle of it. The fact that he made me feel less than for so long, only to end up with women who had the exact things he criticized me for wanting. And it wasn't just Marina either. Danielle mentioned that he dated another woman after Marina who also had kids, twins, no less, and yet he didn't seem to mind at all. In fact, it seems like every girlfriend he's had since his ex-wife has had kids, except for one. And get this, most of them were thin, blonde, and had big boobs. Like, is that all it takes? Is that the magic formula for these guys who claim they don't like kids? They'll ditch you if you want to start a family, but have no problem dating single moms if they fit this perfect body type? I don't get it. He used to go on and on about how he couldn't stand kids except for his own daughter, who, by the way, he barely even saw, and yet he keeps ending up with women who already have kids. It's like his actions don't line up with anything he said to me. Why was I too much for him? But these other women weren't. I'm so outraged, not just at how he treated me, but at how common this seems to be. I feel like people lie to women like me all the time. You always hear people say, oh, having a kid will hurt your dating life, or guys don't want to date women with kids. But from what I'm seeing, that's just not true. I know so many single moms who are out there killing it in the dating world, while I'm over here, childless, and getting strung along by guys like him. Why do they always say that kids are a deterrent when, in reality, these guys seem to flock to women with kids? It's like he couldn't stand the idea of settling down with me because I wanted kids, but as soon as he met women who already had them, it didn't bother him. He just didn't want to commit to me, and I don't understand why. I don't get why he spent so much time making me feel like I was asking for too much, only to turn around and give everything I wanted to someone else. And let's talk about the racism. This one really baffles me. He used to say the most disgusting, racist stuff behind people's backs. Like, he'd make fun of his ex-wife for dating an Indian guy after they divorced. He'd say things like, oh, can you believe she's with him? Like it was some kind of joke. But then he dates Marina, whose son is half Indian. How does that even make sense? He was always quick to make racist remarks, but when it comes to someone he's attracted to, it's suddenly not a big deal? It's all just so hypocritical. He negged me for everything, from wanting kids to where I lived to my age. But then he turns around and dates women who have the exact lives he claimed to hate. I feel like he used all those things as excuses to get away with treating me like crap, when in reality, he was just a liar. And the worst part, I believed him. For so long, I thought maybe I was too boring or too settled for him, and that's why he didn't commit. But now I see that it was all BS. I'm just so angry about the whole thing. Not because I want him back, I don't. But because I wasted so much time feeling like I wasn't good enough for him, when in reality, he wasn't good enough for me. He's a mess. A lying, hypocritical, racist mess. And I'm done feeling like I somehow wasn't worthy of his commitment when he doesn't even know what he wants himself. It just goes to show, people like him will twist themselves into whatever shape they need to be to get what they want in the moment. He didn't care about me, or about Marina, or any of the other women he strung along. He cared about himself and how he could make himself feel better at the expense of everyone else. I don't need to keep looking for answers as to why he did what he did, because the answer is simple. He's selfish, and he's always going to contradict himself because he doesn't know how to be honest with anyone, let alone himself. As for me, I'm done. I'm done questioning why I wasn't enough for him. I'm done wondering why he treated me the way he did. He's not worth my energy anymore. And the next time someone tries to tell me that having kids or wanting stability will hurt my dating life, I'm just going to laugh. Because honestly, it seems like the only people who struggle are the ones who fall for liars like him. And I'm not falling for that crap anymore.